Hi, it's Verity from the creative team and welcome back to the Wow Embossing Powder YouTube channel. Today I have a totally amazing card for you using the new Totally Amazing trio of embossing powders, and I'm using this to create a really magical winter scene and creating a lot of sparkle and shine, and these teal colours work perfectly for a winter scene. So as I said, I'm going to be using the Totally Amazing trio from Wow Embossing Powders, and this has 3 colours to it. This trio is put together by Marion, of course, who loves teal. So the first colour is the Real Teal, which is a lovely colour. Then we've got Gilded, which is a lovely sort of sandy metallic colour. And then we've got a much more paler teal, which is Ice Teal, and it's a bit more bright and vibrant compared to the first teal. So I'm going to be using all 3 of these powders on the card today. To start off with, I'm going to be using the Jolly Trees Stamp and Die set from Catherine Pooler Designs, and I'm going to be using a selection of different trees from the packet. Now I like to first of all die cut some of the trees out first before stamping them, and then I've got like a negative die to place them in, so I can do quite a lot of stamping of the die cuts all in one go. I don't have to move the stamps on my stamp positioner because I know they're going to stamp down each time I put a new die cut in that negative piece. So I'm going to first of all just place a couple of the die cuts in this negative piece and pick up the stamps once I've aligned them with the die cut using my Misty Door. Next, I'm then going to use my Wow embossing pad. So mine's starting to dry out, so I'm using the Freestyle Reconditioner embossing tool from Wow just to add ink back to my embossing pad so it's nice and juicy again for heat embossing. So I'm stamping all of these trees in my Wow Clear Ultra Slow Drying embossing ink, and obviously as the name states it's slow drying, so you haven't got to worry about it drying out before you add your embossing powder. So I've stamped it twice just to get a good impression, and then the first embossing powder I'm going to be using is the Iced Teal. So this, as I said, is much more of a lovely turquoisey teal, quite a nice light vibrant colour. And once I've covered the trees with this, I'm then going to heat set it. Now I like to stamp and emboss my images a couple of times just to get a really nice thick consistency and a really vibrant colour. Now this little tree here has several different layers to it, and I didn't get a great impression on my first stamping. So I do go back and restamp that one and I get a much better look to the embossing. So I'm just using my Wow dual speed heat gun to heat set this. I'm using heat setting 2, making sure that it was nice and warm before I brought it to the die cut. So as I said, because I've got this negative die cut, I can put more of the die cuts back into the negative panel and then stamp again because I know my stamps won't have moved and they'll still stamp in the same position. And this allows me to do multiple heat embossing and stamping and getting a lot of die cuts completely heat embossed. So for the second set of trees, I'm going to use the Real Teal. So this is a bit more of a darker teal, a bit more of a sort of grungier colour compared to the first one, but it's still a beautiful teal. And as you can see, I'm just heat setting it here so you can see the colours. And I've done a variety of different trees, so again you can really see the powder looks like when it's heat set. So I'm just going to show a close up here of one of those trees where I layered the tree up, and I'm just heat embossing that last layer. It's a lovely teal colour. So with these trees, I decided I was going to create a slimline horizontal or landscape card, as you'd like to say. And I'm just popping the trees on just to see whether it looks okay. Now I wanted a snowy background to this card. So for this card, I'm going to use the Throwing Confetti cover plate die from Catherine Pooler Designs. This would create a really great snowy background. So I've cut a piece of white cardstock down to roughly the same size as the card panel, and I've just die cut from that card the confetti panel. Now it doesn't reach the whole length of that card panel because we are creating a slimline, so I'm just going to reposition the card panel on that confetti die and die cut it again. Now there will be a little bit of overlap, and because this pattern isn't symmetrical, you can't align the dots up perfectly, so there might be a little bit of an imperfection in one area, but I knew this was going to happen and I had planned to place a tree over that to hide it up. Okay, so I need to create some snowy banks now for my trees to sit on. So I've got another piece of white card, same length as the card that I used to die cut the background, snowy background from. And this time I'm just using my scissors to cut a rough snow bank to it. And what's great is doing this means I then also have another snow bank from the other piece that I cut off. And that will be of a slightly different shape, different thickness, and you can layer them up together and they will look really good and look like, well, to me they look like proper snowbanks. And this is really going to help set the scene that this is a lovely winter scene with these trees out in a sort of like a blizzard. Okay, so the easiest way I find to adhere this die cut background down is to use some liquid adhesive, because I can put it in practically most of the areas and get a really good adherence, and no, it won't peel up. I'm then going to add the snowbanks, and I've added some fun foam to the back of them first before adding some double-sided adhesive, because I want to add a bit more dimension to the card, give it a bit more depth, and that's a really good way to layer up your card as well, to add a bit more interest. So I'm doing this with both of the snowbanks. And then I'm trimming off any excess that I have that overhangs the card base. Now, to add a little bit more interest, I'm also then going to start foam mounting the trees onto the background. And as I said, I'm placing one right over my little area where the die cut doesn't cut perfectly in the snow background. And I'm trying to cluster the trees around in two corners and adding a bit more variation by changing up the colours of the teal, so they're not all one teal powder on one side or another teal powder on the other side. I like to usually go with odd numbers, so I have got 9 trees on here, but I've got a 4 and a 5, I think. So it's not quite odd in the second cluster. But I'm trying to vary the depth of the trees by layering them on top of each other, putting some more in the background, some more in the foreground, changing the variation of depth of my foam pads to add more depth and dimension to the card. And I think this creates a lovely little scene. Now I have left a space more in the middle, offset to one side, because this is where I plan to put the sentiment. So for the sentiment, I am taking the Merry Christmas from the Cholly Trees Catherine Brawler stamp set, and I'm going to heat emboss this on some black card using my Misty stamping tool. I'm doing this because I want to stamp the sentiment twice just to get a really good amount of embossing ink down to ensure I get a really pretty heat embossed sentiment. So once I have stamped that twice, I'm then going to cover it with the gilded embossing powder. So this is a beautiful sort of sandy metallic with a bit of glittery shine to it. And it's really beautiful heat set and just really pops off black cardstock really, really well. And a great example of this is a card that Jenny from the creative team recently did in one of her videos too. So do check that out. I've trimmed these down and then I'm just foam mounting them onto the front of the card panel, as I say, offset into that little area that I created to help sort of frame the scene and frame the sentiment. And not putting it straight in the middle gives it a little bit more interest and dimension to your card and your card design. So to finish this card off, I wanted to add a little bit more sort of snow, and I'm using some sequins for this, some iridescent sequins. These are from Lucy's Cards, and this is the Starlight Sequin Mix, which comes with a variety of different size sequins, and I'm layering them up in the background and over the trees just to make it look like it is falling snow. And that colour of the iridescent colour of the sequins really blends well with the beautiful teals of the embossing powders in this card. So I hope you enjoyed today's card and it's inspired you to look at your embossing powders and how you can use them to create winter scenes. This Totally Amazing trio from Wow Embossing Powders really works wonderfully with a winter card, so why don't you get them out when you next create your Christmas card. I hope you enjoyed today's video and please give it a thumbs up and think about subscribing to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. If you'd like to check out my own channel, Pretty Little Button, I've included a link here as well down below. Until next time, happy crafting!